Welcome to the Ultimate Sports Podcast. Today is Monday, July 1st, 2019. It's just going to be an NBA and NHL free agency podcast. Well, on tomorrow's podcast, we'll throw in the other sports and talk about the Wimbledon and baseball and the World Cup and all that. But we'll start in the NBA, where the biggest story of free agency is Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving teaming up and going to Brooklyn to play for the Brooklyn Nets. And it's just amazing. And DeAndre Jordan comes along too. Each of them took discounts so Jordan could play with them. And then they also get Garrett Temple in there too as like the biannual exception or whatever. But the bigger story that everybody's talking about is how they chose Brooklyn instead of Manhattan. And to me, that's not fair to the Nets. I think they deserve a lot of credit for getting these guys. Don't forget, this team was in hell about 4 or 5 years ago after they made that disastrous trade with the Celtics, which they thought it was going to make them a championship contender when they got Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett, and they sent back a bunch of picks and stuff to the Celtics, and the Celtics ended up getting Jason Tatum out of it. And there's jokes on Twitter last night how the Nets actually ended up winning the trade anyway because one of the picks that Brooklyn gave Boston, they traded away to Cleveland. They got Kyrie Irving, and then Kyrie Irving ended up on the Nets. So there's like that joke on Twitter that Brooklyn really won that trade, but 6 years later than they should have. But good for Brooklyn, but the key for them is that Kevin Durant's obviously going to be out next year. And how does he look in 2020 to 2021 with coming back from that injury? If he's not the same, then this is a failure. If he is the same, then they should be the championship contender for those few years that they are on their contract. And they probably would have been the favorite to win the championship if Durant didn't get hurt and he ended up going to Brooklyn anyway. There's all the reports out there that he would have chosen the Knicks if he didn't get injured, and the injury changed everything. And then there's the other reports out there is that New York didn't want Kyrie Irving alone because there's all those KD reports that he was going to go back to Golden State or even go with Kawhi potentially to the Clippers, and Kawhi hasn't signed yet. We'll talk about Kawhi in a minute. But then Kyrie wasn't happy with the Knicks because they didn't want Kyrie alone, which I agree with them because Kyrie has proven that he cannot be the best player on the championship team. He pretty much ruined the Celtics season this past season, and he obviously didn't prove to be the best player on the Cavs pre-LeBron. He's better off as a second fiddle, as we saw in Cleveland when LeBron was there for those couple of years. And then, obviously, Kyrie as the number one guy in Boston was a fail, as the Celtics went into last season as the favorites to win the East. And some people actually picked them to win the championship. Not a lot of people. I believe my friend Derek actually picked the Celtics before the season last year to win the title, and then they lose in round 2 to Giannis and the Bucks, and that was just a disappointing finish to a disappointing season with the Celtics. Now, Kyrie's in Brooklyn, and I think, like I said, Brooklyn next year in 1920 will probably be in the middle of the Eastern Conference playoff race, like 4-5. Maybe 3 is a ceiling if maybe Kawhi doesn't go back to the Raptors. But with Durant there in 1920, that is a top 2 seed in the East, no doubt about it. And we'll continue around the Eastern Conference as the rest of this podcast goes on. But Sean Marks has done remarkable. He went in there with no draft picks, literally, because they were all with Boston in that trade. And then they literally turned so much something into something great in terms of D'Angelo Russell getting him from the Lakers and he becoming an all-star player. That's really what triggered Irving and Durant, let's be honest. If D'Angelo Russell doesn't have that breakout year ago, Brooklyn's in the lottery and the Knicks were probably the team that comes out with the big fish in the sea. But gotta give D'Angelo Russell credit for his breakout. The Nets also have Karis LeVert there, Jared Allen, but that's not good for Jared Allen with the DeAndre Jordan acquisition because Jordan's probably going to start for them, and then a very good young center in Jared Allen would probably be coming off the bench, although Brooklyn should start Allen and have Jordan come off the bench, who I thought got massively overpaid, $10 million a year for 4 years. And then Durant was 4 for $164, and then Kyrie was 4 for 142. And speaking of Kyrie Irving, the guy that replaces him in Boston is Kemba Walker. 4 years, $141 million. Not a bad signing. I think that Kemba, like Kyrie, cannot be the best player on the championship team. Where Boston is right now in the East, I'd say is middle, like kind of in that tier with Brooklyn. I think Brooklyn's better than Boston right now because Brooklyn has better players around Kyrie than Boston does around Kemba. That's just a hot take, and that's the truth because Al Horford left. We'll get to that signing in a minute. And also the Celtics bring in Enes Kanter to replace Horford in the middle. Kanter will give you a double-double, but he is allergic to defense. And maybe Brad Stevens can hide that a little bit as Terry Stotts was able to hide it in Portland when he was there briefly. So the Celtics are still going to be good with Walker and Kanter going with Tatum, Brown, and Hayward. Will Hayward be the same guy as he was before the injury? Or will he continue to be somebody that really hasn't rebounded from it? Although he showed flashes at the end of last year. But the key for the Celtics to me is Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. They have to become superstar type of players if they want to take that next jump, like there's some people saying, especially Tatum, who was the number 3 overall pick in 2017, had high hopes coming in. He had a great rookie year, took a step back last year. Year 3 has to be the year where he puts it all together, and you know what? I think he will. I think that it's an early prediction for me, but I think Jason Tatum makes a jump, and I think Jaylen Brown has shown improvement at the end of last year, and he was better than Jason Tatum last year, too, for the Celtics. So, you got that with Boston. Indiana also improved. They signed away Malcolm Brogdon from the Bucks in a sign-and-trade. I think it was a 4-year, 185 or something like that. 4-year, 140. I don't really know the contract details by heart, but the Pacers got themselves a point guard, a real point guard. Derek Collison retired. So their backcourt now is going to be him, Jeremy Lamb as the third guard off the bench. Well, he'll start before Oladipo comes back. And Oladipo and how he recovers from his Achilles is a big story, too. Everyone's talking about Durant. But if Oladipo doesn't return to form, the Indiana Pacers are not going to be that good. That's just reality. Maybe they'll still be okay, but they're not going to be what people think if Oladipo doesn't recover properly. And then they have the 2 big men with Sabonis and Turner. I think Turner is a guy that they're going to trade. The Bogdanovic loss stinks, but they got TJ Warren there to replace him. So I like what Indiana's done. The surprise move of yesterday was Al Horford signing 4 years, $109 million with the Philadelphia 76ers. That blew me away. I had no idea that Philly was interested in him. If anything, I thought they were a candidate to trade for somebody. I knew they would probably bring back Tobias Harris, which he did. They gave him the 5-year, $180 million max, which, let's face it, they had to bring back Tobias Harris. They gave up too much to get him, so they had to bring him back. They were under so much pressure to bring him back. Jimmy Butler's one thing. At least they got Josh Richardson back for him. We'll get to Butler in a minute. But their new starting 5's Ben Simmons, Josh Richardson, Tobias Harris, Al Horford, Joel Embiid. And what also Horford provides is that he's versatile, and if Joel Embiid misses time, then they can go small ball and then have some random person come in and fill in at power forward or small forward or at 2 guard when Embiid misses time inevitably because he always is hurt. Let's be honest, as great of a player as he is, and he's arguably a top 5 player in the Eastern Conference. And so they got better. There's an argument to be made that the Bucks got worse because they lost Brogdon. But they did bring back Middleton, which they had to do. They brought back Brook Lopez, which they had to do. They had a need at point guard, although Eric Bledsoe's there, but I thought he was fool's gold last year. I really don't think he's that good. They bring in Robin Lopez to back up his brother. I think the Lopez brother combo in Milwaukee I love. I think that's still a title contender. I love Mike Budenholzer. He's a great coach. Giannis just won the MVP. He'll probably be the MVP favorite going into next year, and rightfully so. Him and Kawhi Leonard. And so you got the Bucks who are going to be good. And then they signed Wesley Matthews as a role player. I like that signing. He provides 3-point shooting and good defense. Indiana he was good on Indiana last year after the Oladipo injury. So you got the Bucks, who I think stayed the course rather than got better or got worse, per se. Another interesting one, the Orlando Magic, who made the playoffs last year, brought back Nikola Vucevic, 4 years, $100 million, move that they had to do. He's a good asset. They also signed Al-Farouq Aminu, 3 years, I think it was like $59 million. I hated that deal. Orlando, it's cute that he made the playoffs and all, but really, I just hated that signing. That was just a bad signing, in my opinion. That was probably one of the worst ones of free agency in my mind. So Orlando making sneaky moves to think that they're going to be better. The team that I think is probably going to replace them in the playoffs is the team that signed Jimmy Butler, and that's the Miami Heat, who I think were under a little pressure to do something this summer because they really haven't been relevant since LeBron was there. And now that Wade's gone, they need somebody that can come in and be the lead guy. And Jimmy Butler could be that. He pretty much was Philly's go-to scorer in the playoffs last year, and he was good for them. But they really didn't give up much to get him, Philly. And so they could afford to let Jimmy leave. They couldn't afford to let Tobias leave because they gave up a lot for Tobias. They just gave up 2 role players to get Butler because Butler wanted out of Minnesota so bad that his trade value wasn't great. And so Miami gets Butler. We don't know who they're going to trade to clear cap space other than Hassan Whiteside, who went to Portland. We'll talk about that deal in a minute as Miami gets back Mo Harkless and Myers Leonard. Not bad. I think that they wanted to get rid of Whiteside really bad and knew that he was a flash in the pan a few years ago. Although I think he'll help Portland. We'll get to the Western Conference in a little while, but we're just talking about the Eastern Conference and we're talking about Miami. I think Miami is a bottom seed playoff team, probably like a 7 and 8 right now, unless there's other moves to be made. Toronto hasn't done anything yet. I think they're waiting on Kawhi, and rightfully so. I think there's a chance he goes back there. I think that'd be a huge win for them. If they don't get him back, I think it's a loss, but not as bad as a loss if they didn't win the title. But if I'm Kawhi, I'd go back to Toronto because I think the East is absolutely wide open. And not just the East, but the championship title is wide open. Everybody's penciling the Lakers in as the favorites. I mean, the Lakers literally have no team other than LeBron and Davis. I mean, if Kawhi goes there, it's another story, which I think is realistic. But if the Raptors get Kawhi back and they bring back Danny Green, then they should absolutely be the favorites to repeat. Pascal Siakam's only going to get better. Kyle Lowry actually shed some demons in the playoffs last year and played pretty well. Marc Gasol proved to be a good trade for them. They have some other young guys I like OG Anunoby, Fred VanVleet. So the Raptors can't be slept on here, and I think there's a chance they bring back both Danny Green and Kawhi Leonard. And I think that Green is the most underrated free agent left on the board. The best one's obviously Kawhi. In terms of teams that struck out, the Knicks are obviously the biggest losers of free agency. They lose out on Kawhi and KD and Kyrie, and they get a bunch of role players that they overpaid for. And at least from the Knicks' perspective, they did it on 2-year deals with options as the second years, and then Randall was the exception there. They paid him $366 million, which was an awful contract in my mind. I think Randall is not worth that. He's a good player, but he's not worth that contract at all. He should have gotten maybe $17 million for 3. Like 3 years, $51 million, that's fine, but $66 million, my goodness. He'll probably start alongside Mitchell Robinson in that lineup. The thing that makes the Randall overpaying signing defensible for them is that he's still young, and he's somebody that could help grow with the team. And then the other guys that they signed to the 1+1 deals, with the second years being team options, I think they're going to look to trade those guys in February for more picks and assets instead of trading for guys on bigger contracts to get more picks. I mean, that's the route they should have done. They should have been in on the Andre Iguodala thing. We'll get to Memphis in a minute. They should have tried to get the Whiteside contract from Miami. They should have tried to get the Dion Waiters contract from Miami. They could have tried to get the Nick Batum contract from Charlotte, but I'm not sure if those teams were interested in trading with those respective teams, and maybe they liked the Portland offer better, or they liked any other offers that they had better, and obviously the Memphis offer with Andre Iguodala. But yeah, the guys the Knicks signed to the 1+1s were Bobby Portis, Taj Gibson. Portis obviously can shoot, and he's versatile. Gibson's an adult. He's versatile too, but I think he's washed up. I just don't think he's the same guy as he was with the Bulls, and that's what some people are out there saying, hey, good signing. No, not really. The two shooters they signed, or the 3 point guards, shooting guards that they signed, were not that bad. Elfrid Payton, obviously Scott Perry had him in Orlando. He actually has been sneaky good the last couple years with the Pelicans, putting up triple-doubles, and he kind of reminds me of Rondo a little bit, like a poor man's version of Rajon Rondo. And then Wayne Ellington and obviously Reggie Bullock, and Bullock was somebody I know that the Lakers wanted to bring back. Those guys will provide some shooting, help the young kids, and obviously I think Gibson will help the young kids too. And I think that those veterans, I think, are going to be traded in February for more picks and assets down the road on contenders that could need those types of things if they have players that are injured and whatnot. So I think they signed those guys as possible trade assets the way that the Suns signed Trevor Ariza a year ago. Another interesting team from the Eastern Conference I want to give mention to that I didn't was Charlotte, actually, who lost Kemba Walker but got Terry Rozier in the sign and trade, $3 years, $58 million. Rozier got overpaid. I think that he's more of a six-man point guard rather than a starting point guard, although Boston played very well with him as their starting point guard. And I just think that Charlotte's a bad fit. There's really nobody that's really good on that team. They lost their best asset for Rozier, obviously, with Kemba Walker. And also they lost Frank Kaminsky to Phoenix. They have that Nick Batum contract. I think they'll look to trade eventually. They have a lot of other things that they can do as well. The Atlanta Hawks didn't do anything, which surprised me. They just took on a bunch of bad contracts at the draft and moved up for DeAndre Hunter. I thought that was going to be the team that signed Al Horford. I mentioned that on my NBA free agency preview podcast. Another team that did a move that I thought was a little weird was the Pistons signing Derrick Rose. What does that mean for Reggie Jackson? Pistons were a team that made the playoffs last year, obviously. I really don't know if they're a playoff team again this upcoming season. To me, that depends on Blake Griffin's health. And I wonder if that's another possible free get-out-of-jail bad contract player that could be traded at some point. The Chicago Bulls, Rose's old team, I actually thought that Rose was going to end up back in Chicago. They ended up signing Thaddeus Young on a ludicrous 3-year, $49 million contract. I think that's what the term was, but I thought that was a ludicrous deal. He'll help the young kids. He's an adult, but really, Bulls? I just wasn't a fan of that move, really. And I believe they actually signed somebody else. I can't think of who. It was a point guard. I'll think of it. They're trying to trade Chris Dunn. To me, the key for the Bulls is the development of their young guys such as Kobe White, Wendell Carter Jr., and Lauri Markkanen, and how far they go in their developments. Markkanen has shown that he could be an all-star in the future. Everybody mocked them with that pick, and it actually turned out to be good. That other guy that they have, what's his name? Oh, Denzel Valentine from Michigan State. That's what I was thinking of. He didn't play last year. I think that they have high hopes for him. So that's a team that's really become irrelevant. I remember a few years ago, they were talking about them as a hot free agent destination, that Carmelo was possibly going to go there in 2014. They were going to play for LeBron in 2010. But nope. The Bulls are just irrelevant, and they need one of those young stars to break out for them to become a thing again. And another interesting team that I would like to make a shout out to is the Washington Wizards, who still have Bradley Beal on their team. I think that is the best trade asset out there right now. Somebody's going to trade for him, whether it's Miami to pair him up to Jimmy Butler, or Portland to put him in that team with Lillard and McCollum. Denver, who I predicted, who I think have the assets to do it, would give up Gary Harris and Juan Hernan Gomez and Bull and a pick. They want to give up Michael Porter Jr. because I think they think that Michael Porter Jr. is special potentially because that guy was supposed to be the number 1 overall pick in the 2018 draft and then he got hurt. So they're not giving him up. I'd put that guy on my trade value list if I had to make one. I'll probably do one at the end of the month. So Bradley Beal is, I think, the best trade asset left. So let's move on to the West, and let's start with the team that I think has made the biggest headline trade, and that is the Los Angeles Lakers, who acquired Anthony Davis, obviously. They haven't signed a free agent yet. That's because they literally are banking on signing Kawhi Leonard. Maybe Memphis buys out Andre Iguodala. Maybe they sign Justin Holiday. I made a mistake on my predictions podcast. I thought that Justin Holiday had 1 more year left on his contract, so he's a free agent. So I guess the prediction for Memphis was that they were going to lose Justin Holiday to the Lakers rather than trade him to the Lakers. So the Lakers, I think, are very interesting. What do they do if they lose out on Kawhi? If they lose out on Kawhi, it's not a huge L in my opinion. Then they can go spend their money elsewhere with like Danny Green and guys like that, like role players that can help. Justin Holiday's good. Seth Curry would have been interesting for them. Maybe they bring back Rajon Rondo, who is still a veteran that could help you. He was just involved in all that drama last year, so there's that case against him going back there, although I did predict that Rondo would end up back there and that the Lakers would split up that max spot, which is what they really should do to make their team deeper. But getting Kawhi would be a major win for that team. Another team that getting Kawhi would be a major win for would be the Los Angeles Clippers, who they only made one move, and that was bringing back Patrick Beverley on a $3 or $40 million deal. Don't mind that one. Beverley's a good player. They needed a feisty guy. It's good to bring back an asset that really helped you last year. Now the question is, what did they do with their cap space? Did they trade for Kevin Love? Did they trade for Bradley Beal? I wouldn't even rule him out as a Clipper. And then the Clippers can throw in Landry Shamet and Montrezl Harrell and the first-round pick and send that as a Bradley Beal package. But the Clippers have to do something if they miss out on Kawhi Leonard, or else that would be just as big as a failure as the Knicks missing out on Kevin Durant, because all we heard in April and March and February is that KD was going to be in New York with the Knicks, with Kyrie Irving, and Kawhi was going to be with the Clippers. So if Kawhi doesn't go to the Clippers, that's a huge failure for the Clippers organization, as much as Doc Rivers and Steve Ballmer won't really admit it, because they're smart gentlemen, and they really were linked to Kawhi this whole time, and they wanted him, and they think they're going to get him. And if you don't get him, it's a huge failure, just like the Knicks thought they were getting Kevin Durant. It's literally the same thing, except the Clippers are obviously a better team than the Knicks, by far. So it's going to be interesting what the Clippers do. The Warriors sign and trade for D'Angelo Russell, a part of the Kevin Durant package. They also get back a couple cheapy guys like Shabazz Napier and Trevor Graham. Warriors actually sent the first-round pick to the Nets that's protected, which I don't get. If anything, it should be a pick swap. It's like getting Kevin Durant with a first-round pick. I think that the Warriors should have gotten Russell and a pick too. It should have been a pick swap. We've seen teams do that before. I mean, D'Angelo Russell's a nice player. He's very good. He's improved, and I'm interested to see what they do, because now they have 3 guards that none of them should be coming off the bench in any scenario. I know they'll probably keep Russell around for a little while, but I think they're eventually going to trade him once Klay comes back and they sign him to the max deal, which that had to happen. And obviously they still have Steph. Draymond's still there. I'm interested to see if they bring back DeMarcus Cousins. That would be really, really interesting for them if they were to do that, because they have a needed center, because we don't know Kevin Looney's future. He's still available as a free agent. You also have the Sacramento Kings, who keep overpaying for guys left and right. Overpaid for Harrison Barnes, 4 years, $88 million. That is a massive overpay. Harrison Barnes is a nice player, but probably should be worth like $18 million a year. He's just not very good. I mean, he was a nice player on the Warriors. He's a solid starter, but not worth that contract that Sacramento gave out. But I know they traded for him last year, so it's always smart to re-sign an asset. They always say that, but that's true. They're probably going to lose Willie Cauley-Stein. They made some other moves, too. They signed Trevor Ariza to a 2-year, $25 million deal. I don't like that one. Maybe they do what the Knicks do with their contracts, too. If Sacramento is bad, then they'll flip those guys for picks, which they should do in Sacramento. If they're bad, they should just flip Ariza for a pick. They have a great backcourt in Buddy Hield and De'Aaron Fox. And so it should be interesting to see what that team does long term. Phoenix is a mess. They signed Ricky Rubio, 3 years, $59 million. Awful. They signed Frank Kaminsky, 2 years, $10 million. Not that awful. They could have used a backup center behind DeAndre Ayton. So the Suns are a weird team. They have a weird mix. They're going to be starting Rubio, Booker. They get rid of TJ Warren. Josh Jackson's probably going to be their starting 3. And then they have 8 and up, and it's the center. And then I can't think of who they could put at power forward unless they put Kaminsky there, which that would be weird, having Kaminsky and Ayton play together. San Antonio's done absolutely nothing. That surprised me. I thought that's where J.J. Redick was going to end up, because I thought the Spurs were going to respond in a weird way, because they're obviously ticked off with Kawhi, and they look really, really bad that Kawhi got traded and then he won a championship. That makes that franchise look awful for getting rid of Kawhi Leonard. So I thought that they were going to do something to appease their fans a little bit. They need some wing help. I thought that Bojan Bogdanovic could have ended up there, but he ended up on the Utah Jazz, who I think are now a title contender with the acquisition of Bogdanovic and the acquisition of Mike Conley. So they have those guys. They have Gobert as the center, and then Donovan Mitchell is their 2 guard now, which I'd rather see Mitchell in that James Harden role rather than just a point guard. So Utah's going to be good. Oh, and don't forget about Joe Ingles. So they're going to be pretty much a small ball team. So that's going to be interesting. Denver hasn't done anything yet, really, other than extend Jamal Murray, which I thought was smart. So they have Murray and Jokic, Harris. They bring back Paul Millsap. And then does Michael Porter Jr. become their starting small forward? It's going to be interesting to see what they do. Will Barton's obviously there, too. I forgot about him. So maybe Barton starts again, because Barton was coming off the bench in the second half of last year, if I'm not mistaken. Oklahoma City Thunder done nothing. I thought they were going to do something, but they didn't. I thought they were a sleeping giant to overpay somebody, but they didn't. So they're stuck with their team. Maybe they trade Steven Adams somewhere. You have the Minnesota Timberwolves, who were rumored for D'Angelo Russell, didn't get him. Now, do they overpay for another point guard somehow? And then they obviously have Wiggins and Towns. Wiggins, obviously, has not lived up to that big contract they gave him. Towns, meanwhile, is good. Double-double guy, but just hasn't led that team really anywhere. They made the playoffs that one year. I mean, that was because Jimmy Butler was there, not because Karl Anthony Towns was so special. And not that Karl Anthony Towns is bad, I'm saying. I'm just saying he's never done anything from a winning standpoint in the NBA. That's all. And then also you have the Houston Rockets, who struck out on Jimmy Butler, who were dying to get Jimmy Butler, and now they're stuck with the same team that they had last year with Paul, Harden, Gordon, and Capella. And now that core is back, I really don't think they're still a contender, really. They think their window is shut, and other teams have supplanted them, like the Lakers and the Jazz and the Blazers and the Nuggets. So they, I think, are below the pack. And I think the Warriors are ahead of them with this Russell thing now. So they're probably like the 6th or 7th best team in the West. Oh, and then the Clippers, depending on what they do, could pass the Rockets too. So the Rockets, I think there's like a 5% chance they don't even make the playoffs next year. That'd be a disaster. Oh my God. The Dallas Mavericks bring back Kristaps Porzingis or extend them. Had to do that. They gave up a lot to get Porzingis, so they had to do that. They bring in Seth Curry on a 4-year, $32 million contract. I like that signing for them. That was a good one. You had the Memphis Grizzlies take on Andre Iguodala's expiring contract. Do they keep him as an expiring, or do they buy him out and he goes to a contender? That's going to be interesting to see what they do there. They have him, they have Morant, they have Jaren Jackson Jr. So Memphis is starting to build something a little bit. And then they also got Brandon Clark in the draft, too. That's a good draft pick for them. And then they also have some other players that are overpaid on their team. I know they've been dying to dump Chandler Parsons' contract, but they failed miserably. Nobody wants that guy. That was a massive overpay by the Grizzlies. That contract got a bunch of people fired in that front office, I'll tell you that right now. And then last but not least, the Pelicans, who traded Anthony Davis, win the Zion lottery. I'll tell you what, Zion is the reason why that they're big winners this offseason. Him alone. If they don't get Zion, then they wouldn't have had all these good moves. They bring in Derek Favors in a trade with the Jazz. They bring in J.J. Redick on a 2-year, I think it's $26.5 million contract. So now J.J. Redick's on a new up-and-coming team, just like he was in Philly. So they made some smart moves, and I think that could be a sleeper in the West next year. Don't sleep on the New Orleans Pelicans. Right now, if you ask me, who are the teams in the NBA that have zero chance to make the postseason in 2019-20? I'd say the Knicks, the Wizards if they trade Bradley Beal, the Hornets, I almost said the Hawks, but I paused myself there because I think that could be a sleeping giant next year in the East. So it's 3 teams in the East I think have zero chance of making the postseason next year. I said, and the Chicago Bulls. You can't forget about them. They're really bad. The Bulls, the Knicks, the Wizards, depending on Bradley Beal, and Charlotte. Those are the 4 teams in the East that I think have zero chance to make the postseason. I think those are the 4 worst teams in the East. And then the West, the teams I think have no chance of the playoffs, the Suns, the Grizzlies, and I guess the Timberwolves, because I just don't think that Andrew Wiggins is ever going to become what they envisioned him to be, and Karl Anthony Towns has not shown that he could be the best player on a playoff team. So, there you go. 7 teams in the league, in my opinion, have no chance to make the postseason, and it'll be 6 if the Wizards keep Bradley Beal. And I really think that Sacramento, surprisingly, has a chance to make the postseason because of that backcourt. New Orleans, I think, has a chance because of Zion Williamson. I think that a team like the Orlando Magic have a chance to go back. I think it was a fluke, but I'm not ruling them out. I wouldn't rule out the Pistons to make the playoffs. So there's 23 teams I think could. I know there's a lot of locks. Now I'm going to go over the locks. We'll start in the West. Golden State, I think, is a lock because I just believe in Stephen Curry so much. And D'Angelo Russell's there now. He'll help them. And then they have Draymond, and I think they bring back Boogie. The Lakers are a lock, no matter what happens with Kawhi. I hate to say it, but it's true. They really have no team other than LeBron and Anthony Davis and Kyle Kuzma. But having 2 of the best 15 players in the league, really, you have a chance to be a top seed. So I have to consider the Lakers a lock. Another team I think is a lock is the Utah Jazz, the Portland Trailblazers, and the Denver Nuggets. So that's 5 playoff locks. Oh, and Oklahoma City's a lock, I think. Even though that there could be changes for them on the horizon, but none of them involve Paul George and Russell Westbrook. So 6 playoff locks in the West. And then in the East, the playoff locks are Brooklyn, Milwaukee, Philly, Boston, and Toronto. So, to me, there's 11 playoff locks between the 2 conferences, 6 in the West and 5 in the East. So, 5 plus 4 is 9. So there's going to be 6 teams in the East battling for the last 3 playoff spots in my mind. And in the West, 6 and 3 is 9. So there's going to be 6 teams that are battling for the last 2 playoff spots in the West. So the West is better from a depth perspective than the East, but I think the East is more top-heavy than the West, especially if Kawhi Leonard chooses to go to or back to the Raptors. And another thing is that the Clippers become a playoff lock if they sign Kawhi Leonard. So that would be 7 locks. And then 5 teams battling for 1 spot in the Western Conference. Now I'm going to do NHL free agency. I'm going to go in the order of how these signings went down, courtesy of CBSSports.com. Matt Duchene was the first big name off the board. 7 years, $56 million. It was reported last night. Became official today. $8 million a year for Duchene. Nashville needed a little bit of a shakeup. You knew that this was sort of a done deal when they shipped out PK Subban. They needed more offense. They needed like a little change up. He's versatile. He'll help them. Are they a contender? Yeah, I'd say they're a contender, but I don't know if they're really a Stanley Cup contender or they're just a playoff contender. So there's two type of tiers of contenders that I always say in sports. Sergei Bobrovsky, 7 years, $66.5 million with the Panthers. You know this was bound to happen. Now the question is, the kid that they drafted at the draft, they thought he was going to be the goalie of the future. So I wonder if Bobrovsky's going to outlast the contract in Florida. Who knows? But that's a good short-term solution for them. The Dallas Stars signed Joe Pavelski, 3 years, $21 million. I don't like that signing at all. I think that Pavelski's old and he should have just went back to the Sharks. For Minnesota Wild, Matt Zuccarello, 5 years, $30 million. So Dallas loses an important piece to their team from a year ago, and he goes over to a team that is pretty much stuck in mediocrity right now in the Wild. Canucks, Tyler Myers, 5 years, $30 million. Canucks get a much-needed defenseman. He'll probably be on their top pairing. Panthers, Brett Connolly, 4 years, $14 million. Nice deal for Connolly. Nice player. So, obviously, he was a top 10 lottery pick that was a bust, but really has turned into a nice role player in the league. Flames, Cam Talbot, 1 year, $2.75 million. Cam obviously did not live up to expectations in Edmonton after being traded from the Rangers. We'll see if a change of scenery will help him. Corey Perry, 1 year, $1.5 million with Dallas. I'm interested about this one to see how he looks on a new team. It's weird with him that he's no longer a member of the Anaheim Ducks. Capitals, Richard Panik, 4 years, $11 million. Not a bad signing, good role player. He'll probably be a fourth liner for them. Minnesota Wild, Ryan Hartman, 2 years, $3.8 million. Hartman's a nice player, good role player, but obviously Nashville overpaid for him in the trade a year ago, or 2 years ago, whenever that was, when they got him from Chicago. They got a first rounder for him, talking about the Blackhawks. Mike Smith at Edmonton, 1 year, $2 million. He'll probably be their starter, if not their backup. And obviously he just wasn't the answer for Calgary. I don't think he'll be the long-term answer for Edmonton. Sabres, Curtis Lazar, 1 year, $700,000. Good role player there. Sabres are a team that are trying to make the playoffs. Canucks, Jordy Ben, 2 years, $4 million. A good depth defenseman. The big one, Rangers, Artemi Panarin, 7 years, $81.5 million, $11.6 annually. That was the best signing, and that will really put the Rangers back in the conversation as a playoff contender in the East. Not necessarily Stanley Cup contender, they're a while away from that, but this puts them right back in the conversation for the playoffs in the Eastern Conference with the moves they made. Maple Leafs, Jason Spezza, 1 year, $700,000. Spezza's a nice role player. He was good with Dallas last few years. I think he'll help the Maple Leafs. Noel Acciari, 3 years, $5 million with the Panthers. So the Panthers spending around the money they thought they were getting Artemi Panarin with role guys such as Acciari and Connolly. Penguins, Brandon Tanev, 6 years, $21 million. I don't like that signing at all. Tanev's a nice player, but I just don't get why Pittsburgh gave him 6 years. That was weird. Sharks, Timo Meier, 4 years, $24 million. They had to bring him back. Senators, Ron Hazy, 1 year, $3.5 million. Just a depth guy that'll probably flip at the deadline. Blue Jackets, Joonas Korpalazzo, 1 year, $1.15 million. Is he going to be their starting goaltender? Going to be remain to be seen because their backup from last year is actually pretty good too. Canadians, backup goalie Keith Kincaid, 1 year, $1.75 million. Not bad. He'll be backing up Carey Price. Price gets hurt a lot, so you never know. You might see Kincaid in there a lot, more than you would think. Blue Jackets bring back Ryan Murray, 2 years, $9.2 million. Murray hasn't lived up to number 2 overall pick status, obviously, but has turned himself into a nice, second or third line D-man. Lightning, Luke Schenn, 1 year, $700,000. Luke Schenn's a depth defenseman. He replaces Anton Strawman, who went to Florida. Capitals, Garnett Hathaway, 4 years, $6 million. Another role guy for them. Red Wings, Valtteri Filppula, 2 years, $6 million. Okay. Blackhawks, Ryan Carpenter, 3 years, $9 million. That one's okay. Avalanche, Jonas Donkoski, 4 years, $15.6 million. Not a fan of that contract, really. Blue Jackets, Gustav Nyquist, 4 years, $22 million. They had to get somebody to replace Panarin and Duchesne's production, and Ryan Zingle too, but Nyquist is nowhere as good as Panarin and Duchesne. He's better than Zingle probably, but Nyquist will probably fit in pretty well with Pierre-Luc Dubois and Cam Atkinson and those guys there in Columbus. Sharks, Tim Heed, 1 year, $960,000. That's a depth defenseman for the Sharks. Lightning, Curtis McElhinney, 2 years, $2.6 million. They got their new backup goaltender behind Vasilevsky. Oilers, Alex Chiasson, 2 years, $4.3 million. Nice little role player, bottom 6 forward. Stars, Andre Sekera, 1 year, $1.5 million. That's a depth piece for them. Canucks, Oscar Fantenberg, 1 year, $850,000. A depth piece there. Wild, Gabriel Dumont, 2 years, $1.4 million. Okay. Flyers, Andy Andernoff, 2 years, $1.5 million, another role guy. Panthers, Anton Strawman, 3 years, $16.5 million. There was somebody, I believe it was E.J. Raddick, that hated this signing and said he was past his prime. I just think that he wasn't healthy. He'll help that young group there down in Florida. Phil Quinville's a good coach. Devils, Wayne Simmons, 1 year, $5 million. A little bit of a prove-it year for Wayne Simmons after a bad year last year at Philly and Nashville. Oilers, Juhar Kayara, 2 years, $2.4 million. Senators, Tyler Ennis, 1 year, $800,000. Ennis will be a role player for them, mentor for the kids. Bruins, Connor Clifton, 3 years, $3 million. They had to bring him back. Brett Ritchie to the Bruins, 1 year, $1 million. That's fine. Patrick Nemeth, 2 years, $6 million to the Red Wings. Good depth defenseman. Sammy Blais, 1 year, $850,000 from the Blues. Good depth piece. Thomas Jerko, 1 year, $750,000 from the Oilers. Maple Leafs, Nick Shore, 1 year, $750,000. All these are pretty much depth pieces, except for this one. Anders Lee, Islanders, re-sign him, 7 years, $49 million. They had to do it, especially losing out on Panarin to the Rangers and losing John Tavares last year. So they retained their captain. It's a move that they had to make, and good job by Lou Lamoriello for doing that. And one more free agency news just broke for hockey. Chicago signs former Islanders goalie Robin Lehner, 1 year, $5 million. That's fine. I like Lehner. Obviously, he'll be the backup to Corey Crawford there. Crawford's somebody that's aging and is sort of past his prime, kind of like Henrik Lundqvist and Jonathan Quick. And even Carey Price is somebody that's getting a little older. So some of these guys that are great goaltenders or were great that are past their primes, they better have good backups if those teams want to compete. Just like the NBA thing, I'm going to do it here at the NHL, go around the league, who are playoff locks and who are lottery locks. I'm going to do it different. I'm going to start with the playoff locks. We'll go with the West. Colorado, San Jose, St. Louis, to me, are all locks. And Nashville, too. So that's 4. And then the rest of the group that I think will be in play for the playoffs I'll get to in a little bit. So there's 4 locks from the West. And then from the East, I think the locks are Pittsburgh, Washington, Toronto, Boston, and Tampa Bay. So you have 5 locks in the East and 4 locks in the West. Lottery locks, Eastern Conference. This is tough because I think a lot of teams from the Eastern Conference improved. So to me, the Metropolitan Division, I really think that all those teams have a chance to make the postseason. And in terms of the Atlantic Division, there's one lottery lock, and that's obvious, and that's the Ottawa Senators. Oh, and there's another lottery lock, too, the Detroit Red Wings. So the two worst teams in the Eastern Conference both reside in the Atlantic Division. I think the Metro is clearly the better division. I think all 8 of those teams have chances to make the playoffs. I think 2 of them are locks, obviously, in Pittsburgh and Washington. But I really don't think the rest of the 6 are either playoff locks or lottery locks. And lottery locks in the West, that's pretty tough. Honestly, I'd say the Kings are a bit of a lottery lock because their guys are aging. Kopitar and Doughty, who knows, maybe they trade those guys quick. Somebody that is sort of past his prime in a weird way. I'm tempted to say that Anaheim's a lottery lock because they got rid of Corey Perry. They have a good goalie in John Gibson, but the rest of that group is sort of aging. So I think those are 2 lottery locks from the Pacific Division of the Western Conference. And I think that the Central Division, like the Metro Division, I think that all those teams have a chance to make the postseason. So to me, there's really only 4 lottery locks. And those 4 teams are obviously Ottawa, Detroit, LA, and Anaheim, I think, are the 4 worst teams in the league. And all those teams really don't have a chance to make the postseason. I'd be flabbergasted if any of those 4 teams made the playoffs. So in the West, you would have, in my mind, 2 lottery locks and 4 playoff locks. 4 and 2 is 6. There are 14 teams in the West and 16 teams in the East. So 6 and 4. Wait a minute, now I'm confused. 2 and 4. Oh, 2 and 4 is 6, and 14 minus 6 is 8. So I think there's 4 playoff locks, and then 8 teams in the West are going to be battling for that last spot, including a team like the Vancouver Canucks. I wouldn't rule them out as a playoff team next year. I think they have to bring back Brock Boeser, even though he's restricted. You got to match that offer sheet. I think they'll be back in the mix. That's a team on the come, and I think that they're no lottery lock anymore. Same for Arizona, put up or shut up. Edmonton has the best player in hockey, so you can't count them out really in terms of playoffs. Chicago is a team that has some championship experience, although I don't love them getting rid of Joel Quenneville. That might turn out to be a big mistake by them. So they'll be in the mix. Dallas and Minnesota, obviously, will be in the mix, too. And then there are 2 teams I am missing in this mix. I said the locks were San Jose, Colorado, Nashville, and the Blues. And I said that the middle teams. Oh, Vegas. You know what? Vegas is a lock, I think. So I'm putting them with those other teams. That's 5 locks and 7 hopefuls. Yeah, so the hopefuls are... Oh, Winnipeg. I knew I was missing somebody. Winnipeg, to me, is a hopeful. They're no lock anymore because they lost Trouba. They have to bring back Patrick Laine. They lost Kevin Hayes. I don't think that's really a lock anymore to make the playoffs. As loaded as they are offensively, I just think that their defense obviously takes a step back without Jacob Trouba there. So, locks, Nashville, St. Louis, Colorado, San Jose, Vegas. Lottery locks, LA and Anaheim. Playoff hopefuls in the West. Calgary, forgot about them. Arizona, Vancouver, Edmonton. Winnipeg. Chicago. And Minnesota. Whew. East. I said the playoff locks were Tampa, Boston, Toronto, Washington, Pittsburgh. Lottery locks, there's only 2. It's Ottawa and Detroit. The rest are hopefuls. The rest of the teams in the East are hopefuls. Montreal, Florida, Buffalo, Islanders, Carolina, Columbus, Philly, Rangers, Devils. All hopefuls to make the playoffs in the East. So there's that. So I think it's very wide open right now in hockey, and it's going to be interesting to see what moves are to come. I'll be back tomorrow. I'm going to talk more free agency in both sports. Baseball we'll get back into. World Cup we'll get into. Wimbledon we'll get into. And obviously my best bet for tomorrow as well. Hope you guys have a great day, everyone.